It's April 6, 1994, and a plane carrying Rwanda's president is shot down over Kigali. Within hours, roadblocks appear across the capital. What happens next would become one of the fastest genocides in human history. Yet the world watched in silence. Today, we're uncovering the shocking truth behind Rwanda's 100 Days of Terror and asking the question that still haunts us. Why did the international community fail to act? Welcome back to the channel. I'm diving deep into one of the most devastating yet overlooked tragedies of the 20th century. The 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda claimed around 1 million lives in just 100 days. That's a rate of killing that exceeded even the Holocaust. But here's what's truly disturbing. This wasn't a spontaneous outbreak of violence. This was systematic, organized, and preventable. Today we'll explore three critical questions. How did a nation turn against itself so quickly? What warning signs did the world ignore? And most importantly, what lessons can we learn to prevent future genocides? By the end of this video, you'll understand why Rwanda's story isn't just history. It's a blueprint for recognizing and stopping mass atrocities before they begin. To understand what happened in 1994, we need to go back decades. Picture this. You're living in a country where your identity card determines your fate. In Rwanda, colonial powers had transformed fluid social groups into rigid ethnic categories. The Belgians favored the Tutsi minority, giving them better education and positions of power. But in 1959, everything flipped. The Hutu majority took control, and suddenly being Tutsi meant facing discrimination, violence, and periodic massacres. By the 1990s, hundreds of thousands of Tutsis had fled to neighboring countries. Many joined the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, which launched an invasion in 1990. Here's where it gets crucial. This civil war created the perfect conditions for genocide. Economic crisis hit hard. Coffee prices collapsed, leaving 90% of the population struggling. Unemployment soared, especially among young men who would later become the foot soldiers of genocide. The government, led by President Juvénal Habyarimana, used ethnic division as a political tool to maintain power. But the most dangerous element was a systematic preparation for mass killing. Radio stations began broadcasting anti-Tutsi propaganda. The infamous Radio Télévision Libre des Mille Collines called Tutsis cockroaches and urged Hutus to cut down the tall trees, a coded reference to killing Tutsis. Weapons were distributed to civilian militias called Interahamwe. Lists of targets were prepared. This wasn't spontaneous hatred. This was manufactured genocide. On April 6, 1994, President Habyarimana's plane was shot down. To this day, we don't know who was responsible, but it didn't matter. Within hours, the killing machine activated. The speed was unprecedented. In the first week, Prime Minister Agathe Uwilingiyimana was murdered, along with 10 Belgian peacekeepers protecting her. This wasn't random. It was designed to force international troops to withdraw, leaving Rwandans defenseless. What followed was systematic extermination. Government officials, military leaders, and militia coordinators implemented a plan that had been years in the making. Roadblocks appeared everywhere, manned by soldiers and civilians checking identity cards. Being Tutsi meant death. Being a moderate Hutu meant death. Helping Tutsis meant death. The killers used a horrifying mix of modern organization and primitive weapons. While radio stations coordinated attacks, Most victims were killed with machetes, clubs, and spears. This wasn't just about efficiency. It was about forcing ordinary citizens to participate. When your neighbor hands you a weapon and tells you to kill or be killed, what do? Churches, schools, and hospitals, places that should have been sanctuaries, became killing fields. The Nyarubuye church, where thousands sought refuge, became a site of mass murder. At Murambi Technical School, French soldiers had promised protection, then abandoned 50,000 people to their fate. But here's what's most chilling. This wasn't just the work of extremists. Ordinary people, teachers, doctors, neighbors, participated in the killing. Some were coerced, others were convinced by propaganda, and some saw economic opportunity in their neighbors' deaths. By July, when the RPF finally stopped the genocide, over 800,000 people were dead. An entire society had been shattered. Now comes the most disturbing part of the story, the international response, or rather the lack of one. The world didn't just fail to act. It actively chose not to see what was happening. The United Nations had peacekeepers in Rwanda, but they were forbidden from intervening. After 10 Belgian soldiers were killed, Belgium withdrew its troops. Instead of reinforcing the mission, the UN Security Council voted to reduce peacekeeping forces from 2,500 to just 270 soldiers. Imagine, as genocide raged, the world's response was to send fewer peacekeepers. The United States, still traumatized by the Somalia intervention, refused to use the word genocide for weeks. Why? Because under international law, acknowledging genocide creates a legal obligation to act. State Department spokesperson Christine Shelley infamously said the killings were acts of genocide, but not genocide, a distinction that saved no lives but protected political careers. France's role was particularly controversial. Operation Turquoise, launched in June, was supposedly humanitarian, but many argue it helped genocidal forces escape to neighboring Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Meanwhile, the media largely ignored the story. CNN gave more coverage to O.J. Simpson's car chase than to the Rwandan genocide. When reporters did cover it, they often described it as ancient tribal hatred, a narrative that obscured the political and economic factors that made genocide possible. But here's what's most tragic. The warning signs were everywhere. Intelligence agencies knew weapons were being distributed. Diplomats reported the hate radio broadcasts. UN peacekeeping commander Romeo Dallaire sent desperate cables warning of impending genocide. His famous Genocide Facts in January 1994 detailed plans for mass killing, but his superiors told him not to act. The world had the information, the legal framework, and the moral obligation to intervene. It chose not to. So why did the world stay silent during Rwanda's 100 days of terror? The answer reveals uncomfortable truths about international politics, media attention, and human nature itself. First, Rwanda had no strategic value to major powers. No oil, no significant trade relationships, no geopolitical importance. When genocide happens in places that don't matter to powerful nations, the response is predictably weak. Second, the international community was suffering from intervention fatigue. Somalia had gone badly, Bosnia was ongoing, and nobody wanted another complex African conflict. It was easier to look away. Third, and perhaps most importantly, acknowledging genocide means acknowledging failure. If the international community admits that genocide is happening, it must act. If it doesn't act, it becomes complicit. Denial was politically convenient, but Rwanda's story doesn't end with genocide. Today, it's one of Africa's most stable and prosperous nations. President Paul Kagame, who led the RPF forces that stopped the genocide, has overseen remarkable economic growth and reconciliation efforts. Survivors and perpetrators now live side by side in unity villages, their children playing together. The country has banned ethnic identification and promotes a single Rwandan identity. Every April, during Kwibuka, the Week of Remembrance, the nation pauses to honor the victims and recommit to never again. Yet challenges remain. Some critics argue that reconciliation has been imposed from above rather than emerging organically. Others worry about restrictions on free speech and political opposition. The trauma of genocide affects not just survivors, but their children, creating intergenerational wounds that take decades to heal. Rwanda's genocide teaches us that never again isn't automatic. It requires constant vigilance. Today, as we see warning signs of mass atrocities in other parts of the world, we must ask ourselves, are we paying attention? Are we demanding action from our leaders? What do you think? Should the international community have intervened in Rwanda? And more importantly, what can we do to prevent future genocides? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and respond to as many as I can. If this video opened your eyes to a tragedy you didn't know about, please share it with others. And if you'd like to explore another chapter of history that's often left in silence, watch our video on the Armenian genocide. It's on your screen right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because understanding the past isn't just about honoring the victims, it's about building a better future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.